all fired up.
Well, Mr. Funny Man, is this how you get your sick kicks?
What? It's just an ordinary...
All fired up.
Oh my goodness!
Welcome back, Weirds and Weeboos, to the channel Double Doge, a new series for my channel, the Skylanders character profile. Now don't worry if you don't know what Skylanders is all about, because these videos could be a decent entry point for you. If you already know what's going on with these, or don't care, you can skip to this timestamp to get to the meat of the video, but for the rest of you, let me give you the short version on what Skylanders is. Skylanders was one of the very first real toys-to-life games, where you could buy figures of the characters, which then, when placed on the Portal of Power, which came with the game, would enter the world of the game. So essentially, by buying the physical figures of the characters, you would unlock the ability to play as those characters in the game. Its core gameplay is a bit of a mix of everything, a mix of puzzle solving, exploration, sort of platforming, although the first two games didn't have a jump button, but mostly the combat. Each Skylander has at least 3 moves, their own stats, their own set of upgrades, and also, of course, each Skylander will belong to one of the 8 elements: water, air, earth, fire, magic, tech, life, or undead. For this first episode, I'm going to go relatively slowly and do a lot of explaining to help any of you not familiar with the Skylander series. And also because with our first Skylander, there isn't so much to talk about anyway, so I don't mind it making the video a bit longer. But don't worry, in future videos I'll be firing through these points much faster, and assuming you've either watched this first video or are already familiar with Skylanders. When you bought Skylanders, you of course got it in a starter pack. As I mentioned, you get the Portal of Power, the actual thing that you use to put the figures into the game. But then as well as that, there's no point in having the game if you have no figures at all to start with. So it comes with 3 other figures, and those 3 figures are Trigger Happy of the tech element, Gilgrunt of the water element, and of course the topic of today's video, Spyro the Dragon of the magic element. Yeah, it's kind of easy to forget, but technically these games are quote-unquote Spyro games. A big reason why I wanted to make this series is because although I've really enjoyed finding the Skylanders community on YouTube, after not really seeing any content about Skylanders online for a long time, at the same time, one thing that has bothered me is that I've noticed that almost every content creator out there, even if their videos sometimes can be quite nice, a lot of the time don't really give good reasons for their opinions. They just kind of say, this is my opinion, which is a bit of a shame because I feel like there's a lot to talk about there, especially because most of the content you see about Skylanders is obviously like, oh, tier lists or top lists of favourite Skylanders or least favourite Skylanders in this element or whatever. And it feels like a lot of them are just, yeah, this guy's cool, yeah, this guy isn't cool. And, you know, I'd like to kind of go more into, okay, this is why this is a good character and this is why this one is not so much a good character. And actually analysing the reasons why they, in my eyes, succeed or fail. But also it's very easy to be biased with Skylanders, not only because of nostalgia, but also because, of course, there's so many of them and there's so much to do with all of them that it's very easy for you to completely miss out on a Skylander that's actually amazing just because they take a long time to get good. And you don't put in the time to get good with them because there's so many of them that you could never hope to put in the time to get good with all of them. Right? Well, that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to give every single Skylander as fair a shot as I can possibly give and look at every single possible use and every single possible strength they could have in certain situations, so that hopefully no one will feel like I'm being unfair when I later give my reasons why, when doing a more serious tier list, certain ones are much better than others. Also, do not worry about my sanity. It does take a long time to get all the kind of leveling up and money needed to try all the upgrades and all that, especially because every Skylander has 2 different upgrade paths, and I need to try both of them in these videos. But I'm not completely insane. I'm not earning all that money just by playing the game every single second of my goddamn life. If you are unaware, there's a bit of an exploit with using a certain magic item in the 3rd game, Swap Force, called Sky Diamond, which you can use to get a lot of money. I'm doing a mix of earning this money for the Skylanders by actually playing them and earning some of it with this exploit, because otherwise these videos would take way too long to prepare. Anyway, hope you enjoy. So as any Skylanders fans in the audience know all too well, Spyro was the Skylanders to start it all, and as such has been played by just about anyone who ever touched the first game, Spyro's Adventure. Everyone got Spyro along with Trigger Happy and Gill Grunt, as I said in the starter pack, but despite that, Spyro had still hardly been the centre of discussion so far in the fandom. That mostly comes down to the fact that Spyro is designed as an all-rounder with basic abilities. Very little about his kit is particularly flashy, even when fully upgraded, but that also means he doesn't struggle with the long wind-ups or convoluted setups some more flashy Skylanders do, which I suppose is rather appropriate for a starter pack Skylander. Spyro overall has pretty average stats, as you would have expected for an all-rounder. They have 280 health when you get them brand new, however when you fully level them up to level 10, they have 560. You can reach level 20 in the later games, however I'm just looking at the first game for now to keep things simpler. It's a pretty average amount of health. He has a slightly above average speed stat at 50, but he has a slightly below average armor stat at 18, a pretty average crit stat at 30, and a pretty average elemental power at 25. To quickly clarify any kind of confusion, the armor stat in this game isn't quite what you might expect it is. It's not like you take less damage if you have armor. Essentially, it's like a percentage chance that when you get hit, you will take 0 damage, and having more armor gives you a higher chance of taking 0 damage if you get hit. It's still luck-based though. Elemental power, on the other hand, plays into obviously the elements I brought up earlier. There are many places in the games where when you walk into them, it will tell you that a Skylander of a certain element will be stronger in that area. And if your Skylander matches that element, then all attacks you perform will deal extra damage in that area. If you only own a couple Skylanders in that element, that damage boost won't be that much, although it will still be worthwhile, but the more Skylanders you own in that element, the more that damage boost will increase. As well as that, the higher your elemental power stat is, the more that damage boost increases. Which, by the way, if you're looking at your Spyro figure and thinking, wait, mine doesn't have an elemental power stat of 25, friendly reminder, that is probably because of the amount of magic Skylanders you own. You know, the more Skylanders in the same element you own, the more Skylanders in that element have their elemental power go up, as I mentioned, and Spyro's, of course, in the magic element. Spyro's first attack is a simple range fireball, which does okay damage, but unfortunately really doesn't go far for a ranged attack. Luckily, this range problem is remedied by his first upgrade, but until you get that, this attack certainly doesn't feel very ranged. It doesn't kill fast, but at least with the range upgrade, it does become pretty reliable and safe to use without putting yourself in danger to land hits. Spyro's second attack is a charge attack, which allows him to move faster for a bit and damage anyone hit by his horns. But obviously at the cost of his ability to turn. He can still do it, but it's obviously not as fast. Its damage is also not particularly impressive, and Spyro can't charge through enemies with this, unfortunately. Essentially, he just kind of pushes them a bit to the side while damaging them, and if that doesn't push them enough to the side to let him through, he actually won't be able to charge through them. But as a pure movement option, this is actually surprisingly effective. You can use this to either help dodge telegraphed attacks, or you can use it to rush down high-priority targets that are trying to escape you. A good example would be a live spell punk. These enemies can't actually damage you, but they heal enemies, and on harder difficulties in the later games, they can actually heal them for massive amounts to the point where you sometimes basically have to kill these live spell punk first, because the other enemies will never die otherwise. And it can sometimes be difficult to get to them if there are other enemies in the way at the same time they're running away. And this is where the charge comes in useful. This is where we get into Spyro's third and final attack though, which like all third attacks, has to be unlocked through an upgrade. Unfortunately, it's definitely the least useful of his three. Using it will toggle in between a flying mode and a walking mode. While flying, Spyro is supposed to move faster and have increased armor, but the reduced friction makes him a little bit harder to control, turning slower and struggling to change direction once you already have momentum. As well as this, trying to charge while flying will cancel your flight. Many people consider flying moves to be a waste of a move slot in Skylanders, especially since the first game had a lot of Skylanders whose third move was flying, but I actually do find most flying moves to be a little underrated and actually kinda useful. The speed can be very helpful mid-battle, and sometimes can do a lot to fix the failings of otherwise clunky movesets. The problem is that Spyro's flight does not complement his moveset at all. If anything, his moveset actually makes his flight pretty redundant. Spyro already has a more effective movement option with his charge, which actually outspeeds his flight even over longer periods of time when the charge runs out and you have to press the button again. The only use of his flight is to be able to move at a fast speed while doing the fireball attack, because obviously you can't shoot fireballs while charging. But since the damage of the charge and fireball is pretty comparable, this is rarely necessary. I can often appreciate a flying move on a lot of Skylanders in this game, despite how hated they are by the general community, especially because I think one of the biggest problems with the Skylanders franchise as a whole is even the fastest of Skylanders kind of move a bit too slow for the games to be able to have the highest skill ceiling they could potentially have. But this flying move barely increases your speed, doesn't increase your speed more than the charge move you already have, and just in general doesn't really contribute anything to Spyro's kit. Well, that's all of Spyro's kind of base moveset, however we need to talk about his upgrades. Every Skylander has 4 basic upgrades, and once those are bought, you'll have 6 other upgrades split across 2 paths to pick from. You get to pick one of these paths to be your next 3 upgrades. Finally, each Skylander has a Soul Gem upgrade, which is their most expensive upgrade, but can be bought at any time, provided that you have found the Skylander's Soul Gem hidden in one of the levels as a collectible, at least if that Skylander was a new addition to the game you're playing. In newer games, if you're playing a Skylander from an older game, then you don't have to find the Soul Gem to buy their Soul Gem upgrade. Although it's not a solid rule, for the most part, usually one upgrade path will focus on making one of your moves better, while the other one will focus on making another one better. Other than that, that's essentially it, except for one more rule, which I think is kind of obvious, that there can be certain upgrades which can't be bought before other upgrades if it's stuff like if you need to get an upgrade to get your 3rd attack, but then there's an upgrade which makes the 3rd attack better for your Soul Gem upgrade. Obviously you can't buy the Soul Gem upgrade to upgrade your 3rd attack if you haven't even got the upgrade to unlock your 3rd attack yet. But other than that, it is just this path system and Soul Gem system, and other than that you can buy the upgrades in any order. The final type of upgrade, which we'll get more into later, is their Wow-Pow. Even more expensive than their Soul Gem upgrade. A Wow-Pow upgrade is an upgrade that any normal Series 1 Skylander won't have. However, after the first game, they started doing reposes, as people call them, where they re-released old figures with a new pose and a new upgrade, which is their Wow-Pow. So yeah, the Wow-Pow acts just like the Soul Gem, only it's even more expensive, and this one you don't need to find a Soul Gem for. As well as that, unfortunately, even though there were some Series 3 versions of some characters and even some Series 4s, a Series 3 version of a character will not have the Series 2 and the Series 3 Wow-Pow, it will just have the Series 3 one. So unfortunately, if you want to try out every single Wow-Pow that Gil Grunt has, for example, the only character who got a Series 4, yes, you will have to get Series 2 Gil Grunt, Tidal Wave Gil Grunt, and Anchors Away Gil Grunt to be able to use all 3 Wow-Pows. In Spyro's case, he got a Series 2 and a Series 3, which I'll be talking about both of those later. Spyro's 4 basic upgrades in ascending order of cost are one which improves the range of his fireball attack, one which increases the length of his charge before he has to cancel it, one which unlocks the ability to use the fly move in the first place, and finally the most expensive of his basic upgrades will upgrade his fireball attack to shooting 1 to shooting 3 at a time in a cone. This in theory could triple the damage output of the move, and that would usually be an upgrade powerful enough to be reserved for a Soul Gem upgrade, or one you must at least pick a path to unlock. So this one certainly outshines the other 3 basic upgrades. However, there is a catch, which explains why something so powerful is such a cheap upgrade. The way these fireballs are implemented, it often won't actually be tripling your damage, because even though each fireball is capable of doing an equal amount of damage to a normal single fireball, if you hit an enemy with one of those 3 fireballs, that same enemy can't be hit by the other 2. In other words, if there are 3 enemies and they're all in a perfect position to get hit by all 3 fireballs, then yes, you will deal triple damage. However, if there's just one enemy and you're close enough that all 3 fireballs will hit, it will still only hit that enemy once, even if all 3 fireballs touch that one enemy. So yeah, tripling his fireballs essentially only helps for crowd control and not single target damage. Of course, Spyro also has 2 upgrade paths, and his top path is centered around his fireballs. The first upgrade makes it so that a small ring of fire will appear around Spyro as he breathes his fire. The second one makes his center fireball explosive to improve its damage and ability to hit multiple enemies at once. And the final upgrade on this path allows you to charge up and shoot a mega fireball. On the other hand, Spyro's bottom path is centered around his charge ability. The first upgrade allows his charge to stun enemies struck by it. The second one simply improves the damage and makes it deal fire-based damage rather than just physical damage. And the final upgrade is probably the flashiest upgrade Spyro has access to. The final upgrade on this path, Ibex's Horns, makes it so that holding the charge for a couple seconds gives Spyro gigantic horns made of pure fire. This improves the damage, speed, and hitbox size of the charge. That just leaves his Soul Gem upgrades and Wow-Pows. So all versions of Spyro will have his Soul Gem upgrade, which is an upgrade which allows him to now, instead of having his flight be cancelled when he tries to use a charge while flying, instead it will perform a new move where he will slow down and stop in place for a second and then slam his head into the ground in place, dealing large damage to anyone around him. If you have a Series 2 figure of Spyro, then you'll also have his new Wow-Pow ability, although I have to admit, it's a little bit underwhelming. Series 2 Spyro's Wow-Pow will make it so that when he performs this slam, he will also shoot out 4 piercing fireballs in all directions around him. These fireballs, although they are granted the ability to pierce through multiple enemies, aside from that have the same damage numbers as any normal fireball, which isn't that high. Only 15 damage in Giants and Spyro's Adventure, and only 42 in Swap Force. Fun fact I just thought I may as well throw in here. If you have a Series 3 Spyro figure and you put it down on Giants, as many of you might know, it will read it as a Series 2 Spyro because Series 3 Spyro didn't exist yet, which means if you buy his Wow-Pow in Swap Force and then switch to Giants, then you can actually unlock his Wow-Pow ability when you don't even have the ground pound yet. It won't do anything, but it's just, funny that you can have this upgrade unlocked when you haven't even bought the move it's an upgrade for. Speaking of which, that's the only move we haven't mentioned yet. Series 3 Spyro, or to call them by their proper name, Mega Ram Spyro's Wow-Pow. Because after Series 2 they realized they probably shouldn't just call them Series 2, Series 3, Series 4. So anyway, Mega Ram Spyro will give them a new Wow-Pow, which they will have instead of the Fireball ground pound one that Series 2 Spyro had, unfortunately. But this new one's a little bit better. Essentially, you will shoot out a magical fireworm at the end of your charges. It will just fly in a straight line and keep going until it hits something and then explode when it hits something. So let's quickly talk about my opinions on these different upgrades. For the basic upgrades, for the most part, obviously they're basic upgrades, you're going to get them anyway, but the longer range upgrade was actually relatively useful, even though it was a bit disappointing. I put it like this, I feel like Spyro should have that much range on his fireballs to start with anyway. I feel like it shouldn't have to be upgraded, but because the range is so short to start with, yes, it is an important upgrade. The upgrade that makes your charge longer isn't quite as effective, even though the charge is probably his best move, just because, making it longer doesn't make it deal more damage, really. Of course, unlocking the flight is not really a great upgrade, but again, there's no point in not buying it as long as you have the treasure. And definitely the triple fireballs, even though you can't hit all 3 on the same target, is the best out of the basic upgrades. When it comes to picking an upgrade path, I'm not gonna lie, this one's a no-brainer. I am going to be, taking into account both paths, and if there's even the slightest argument that, oh, this one could be better in these situations, then I will make that argument. I will say, even if I recommend this one, you could take this path if you wanted to do this. However, with Spyro, it's an absolute clear-cut decision with no ambiguity. You should always take the bottom path, which is actually a surprise to me. I expected, before I had actually tried out the upgrade paths when I was much younger, first playing this game, that the fireball path would be better. Just because the fireballs are his main attack, really. They're a bit more reliable. Yes, the charge is fast, but its DPS isn't great, and it's kind of easy to put yourself in harm's way when you try to use it for DPS. However, the upgrades you get for your fireballs, which already start out with some pretty abysmal damage, even though they have good range, the upgrades you get don't help the damage much more, really. The only upgrade which actually increases your damage is the one that makes the middle fireball explosive, and even that, well, it's only the middle fireball that works on it. The fire shield technically can also be used to deal increased damage, but it's very small, so you essentially have to be literally touching the enemy to get the damage off the fire shield, and even then, it's not a lot of damage. I think they expected that the charge shot would be the big draw of this top path, but honestly, I am completely baffled as to why they thought the charge upgrade would be a good upgrade. Listen, damage numbers were much lower in Spyro's Adventure compared to later Skylanders games, But even for Spyro's Adventure, 22 damage on an extremely long charge-up projectile, single projectile, even if it pierces and can hit multiple enemies, is absolutely pathetic. Especially because if you get hit while charging it, it will be cancelled. And again, this is actually one of the longer charge moves out of the charge moves in the game. So yeah, even though there's certainly an argument to be made that fireballs are better than the charge, there's no argument to be made that the upgrades for the fireballs are worth it. The charge shot is useless, the fire shield is useless, and the center fireball being explosive is the only one which is of any use, and even that is just a small damage buff. Meanwhile, on the bottom path, you will actually unlock Spyro's true potential. It unfortunately got weaker with every new Skylanders game, but in the first game, Spyro's Adventure, Jesus, I remember this upgrade path being good. I didn't realize how insanely good it was in Spyro's Adventure. Like, I just remembered it being, oh yeah, it's a pretty good path. No, it's not just a pretty good path. Spyro is one of the most broken characters in the entire game in the first game on this upgrade path. The stun works on just about every single type of enemy, so even the tankiest of enemies can be stunned. The damage of Ebex's horns is actually, by the standards of Spyro's Adventure, pretty through the roof. The speed is really good too, and the large hitbox means that you don't miss so much with it. There are so many, even extremely late game enemies you can just plow through just by holding down the charge button. His soul gem upgrade is pretty niche. It's nice to have a new move, and technically the damage of this move really is quite high, but there's a reason for that. It's extremely slow and punishable. Not useless, but definitely not a must-get upgrade. As for the Wow-Pows, both of them are actually quite underwhelming for Wow-Pows. A lot of Wow-Pow upgrades, obviously being literally the most expensive upgrades you could possibly buy, tend to be extremely flashy, especially to try and justify you buying a completely different figure, which is the same as the old character, but just with one new upgrade. But in Spyro's case, I feel like they made two very underwhelming upgrades. Series 2 Spyro's Wow-Pow especially is borderline useless, especially considering it came out in Giants, and it's a bit more useful in Swap Force, but in the game it came out in, ooh boy, it's a bit of a yikes. I mean, already I mentioned that the ground pound move is pretty niche. Now all you're getting for 5,000 treasure, without discounts if you don't have any winged sapphires, is plus 15 damage on a move that already deals 80 damage and is already extremely slow. And yeah, I'm saying if only one fireball hits there and it shoots out 4 and the fireballs pierce, you're like, oh well, that's not very fair. But the thing is, the fireballs also aren't targeted, and as well as that, the move already hits in a wide area. So for the fireballs to hit a target and have that target already not be dead from the initial pound, it would have to be at like medium range, and that just, you would have to hit someone with the close range ground pound move with the fireballs that fly out unaimed in 4 different directions at medium range, and even if you do that, you're getting an extra 15 damage. It's not a lot. Definitely when it comes to the Wow-Pows, Mega Ram Spyros is better, but that's not to say it's exactly impressive either. It's more just okay. The way the upgrade is described, I thought that this magical worm would be like an ally that follows you around and does attacks for you temporarily, but no, it kind of just launches it forward as a projectile, and when it lands it deals 50 damage. It's essentially just a free fireball at the end of your charge. Yes, fireballs only deal 15 damage, but that's in Giants and the first game Spyro's Adventure. In Swap Force, they were buffed all the way to up to 42 damage because they realized how pathetic 15 was. So yeah, dealing 50 damage is not much more than 42. Oh yeah, and I completely forgot to mention, but this Wow-Pow attack also does launch enemies into the air. So maybe I should give him some more points for that, because that does interrupt and cancel enemy attacks. They can't attack until they land and then do a get-up animation. And any enemies hit while mid-air will take guaranteed critical hits. This is definitely useful on a few characters in Swap Force. If they have a move like that, they can really abuse it. But I have to say, I don't think it's great on Spyro, considering you can't actually take advantage of the fact they're launched into the air really that much. Because I mentioned that while they're in their air, everything that hits them will crit guaranteed. However, you can't actually hit them with any of Spyro's attacks while they're stuck in the air. The fireballs go under them, and the only thing that I think might be able to hit them is potentially his head pound. But if you use that move, it takes too long to be able to hit the ground. By the time the move actually hits, they've already landed. It's not even a thing of, oh, you just have to be fast. Quite literally, the animation for the attack is longer than the time it takes for the enemy to hit the ground after being hit from your charge moves Wow-Pow. It's like, yeah, you can't really take advantage of it. The only way you might be able to get this to actually crit for you, because I will admit I didn't play him quite as much in SWAT Force even for this video, just because with the Ebex's Horns upgrade being so much weaker in SWAT Force, it felt like even with the other buffs, Spyro felt so neutered in SWAT Force and really kind of slow and frustrating to use. But it might be possible that you could still land a crit if you time it so that you hit an enemy with a fireball just before they land, so they're low enough that they get hit by it, but they haven't quite touched the ground yet, so they're still guaranteed to crit. But obviously, at that point, you're going through all that effort for one critical hit on one fireball attack. It's, you know, it's a lot of work. At the very least, I do somewhat appreciate the fact that they're trying to incorporate these new mechanics added in SWAT Force into the original character's movesets. It does add a bit of variety. It just, once again, really doesn't synergize with Spyro's kit. There's a lot of anti-synergy going on with his upgrades and abilities. In the end, though, Series 3 Spyro is probably the best version of Spyro. It's better than having no Wow-Pow like the Series 1 version, and it's definitely better than Series 2 Spyro. One last thing, which I'm going to try and find something to put in this slot for every Skylander I do when I do these videos, if possible. But I realise that Skylanders isn't Smash Brothers, but there is a little bit of advanced tech in Skylanders actually when it comes to being able to lag cancel moves, or just generally abuse mechanics that might be kind of unintuitive or maybe even unintentional to get an advantage. And I don't know, I just think that's really fun, even if it is for a not so competitive game. Obviously though, it is quite tough to find advanced tech in Skylanders. It's not a Smash game. So I won't have a whole lot to put in these segments, but I'm going to try and find some advanced tech for just about every Skylander I can cover if I can manage that. Spyro, of course, though, is a very basic character, so there's not much to really abuse. The only thing that I discovered is that you can get a small boost to your DPS, which is actually quite valuable considering how garbage Spyro's DPS is in general, by animation cancelling your fireball attack into your charge attack. Essentially, anytime you want to start a charge, you should press the fireball attack button just before you do, because there is absolutely zero lag between starting the animation for shooting a fireball and then instantly snapping to charging. So unlike a lot of other moves in Skylanders, which are given a lot of time for the animation to finish before you're allowed to put in another move, if you go straight from fireball to charge, you can instantly cancel the end lag of your fireball attack. It's not much, but it does give you a slight damage boost, and as I say, with how little damage this character puts out, that's somewhat valuable. While getting footage for this video, I actually managed to discover something else as well, which I never knew was a thing. This is only possible in Spyro's Adventure, and in Giant Onwards this is removed. However, in only Spyro's Adventure, Spyro is actually still able to shoot fireballs while he's doing the ground pound attack animation, which definitely makes the ground pound attack more useful since you can still be attacking while the wind-up for it is going on. In fact, you can get 2 fireball attacks in before you even hit the ground, even once you start doing the move, which is pretty good. The only downside to this is that it actually still creates the fireballs from where Spyro is, and of course Spyro kind of goes pretty high up and then slams down. So that means the fireballs start up too high to hit most enemies. They'll just go over them. The fireballs are brought down, they go diagonally down until they hit the ground and then they start going straight. But if you're very close to enemies, yes, it's very easy for the fireballs to go right over them. Still, this is a really, really nice little piece of, well, I wouldn't be sure if I could call it really advanced tech, but yeah, a way to improve your damage for sure that's probably very obscure and I'm sure many people didn't know, considering I literally just found out for the first time just now. It kind of makes me even more frustrated with how disappointing the Wow-Pow is in Giants, because I can only assume that's the reason why they removed the ability to do this in Giants, is because it would make the Wow-Pow obsolete, but it's already pretty bad, so yeah, it's pretty disappointing that this got removed for the sake of that Wow-Pow. At least that's what I assume happened. Alright, so what's my final verdict on the quality of Spyro? Well, I was going into this expecting that I'd probably be pretty harsh, but I do have some positive things to say. I guess let's get the negatives out of the way first though. This character's DPS, as I think I've made clear enough by now, is garbage. It doesn't matter what path you take. If you take the fireball path, his DPS is absolute garbage. If you take the charge path, his DPS is like pretty bad, but not absolute garbage. You are not picking Spyro to kill enemies quickly or wail on bosses while they're vulnerable. However, Spyro is a relatively fast character with a ranged attack, and that by definition already means he can't be that bad in Nightmare mode in some of the later games on higher difficulties, since it's more important to be able to attack safely or have the ability to dodge than to go for, just pure damage and kill them fast in higher difficulties in the later games. That being said, yeah, you can definitely see why people don't talk about Spyro much, despite how iconic he is and how he's literally the first Skylander ever. There's just someone better than him at just about anything. There's a lot of characters that fit into the fast and has range attack category, and while that is a good thing to have for any kind of Nightmare run playthrough of like one of the games, yeah, you definitely have better options. Yes, most characters who are fast and have ranged attacks aren't exactly great for DPS, but they're at least better than Spyro. That's the main negative thing I have to say, but on the positive side, I did discover just how insane Ibex's horns are. Literally, that one upgrade is like the main reason you play Spyro. Like, I remembered it was cool, and I remembered that it felt good, but again, I really didn't remember it being insane. I just remembered it being good. And yeah, I've come back and it's absolutely insane. It's just a big shame that they decided to drive it into the ground and make it garbage in future games. Kind of surprising to me too, because they actually started making an effort to make these weaker, older Skylanders have damage numbers that actually match up with the newer Skylanders. And considering Spyro is literally the first one and one of the most iconic characters they have, I really thought they might put a bit more effort into giving him a decent moveset for the later games. And I mean, they did give him a significant damage buff on his fireballs, but even then they were still bad at 42 damage. That's in perspective how bad they were at 15. So yeah, I don't know why they made his charge weaker in later games. I mean, it made sense making it weaker from Spyro's Adventure to Giant. In Spyro's Adventure, the charge is almost kind of a cheat code. Literally, it's like anything that isn't a boss, anything that can be stunned, free kill. Like, actually just spam the button and use it. Now that doesn't mean that he's instantly the best character in the first game necessarily, because, well, a lot of the hardest moments in Spyro's Adventure are boss fights, and as I say, he's not going to help you much in a boss fight. But yeah, at least against normal enemies, it's a free win button. So I can completely get behind them reducing the stun a bit on it in Giant, so that you can't just stun lock enemies permanently easily with him. But I'd still say that Ibex's horns feels like a decent upgrade in Giant. I can't say the same in Swap Force. It would have been bad enough if they just made it feel weaker, but on top of that, they literally took away the coolest thing about it. Obviously, the reason why this upgrade is so badass is because you grow giant fucking horns made of fire when you do it. That's really, really cool. Again, it's like the one flashy thing Spyro had. And then you look at his figure in Series 3 and you see that he has the giant horns on his Mega Ram figure. And so you expect that maybe his Wow-Pow will be something to do with Ibex's horns or whatever. But no, actually the game where Series 3 Spyro was made, the only figure which had giant horns, the giant fire horns when Ibex's horns were removed. They do still set your horns on fire, but the size doesn't change. They just put some fire particles around your normal horns. It looks pathetic. It's like, why? So yes, in the end, Spyro is a serviceable choice in the later games for Nightmare mode just by virtue of being ranged and fast, but is pretty outclassed overall. He's mainly useful in Giants in Spyro's Adventure for his Ibex's horn upgrade, which is definitely his most valuable asset. If you really need a fast and long-ranged attacking character who's very good at simply not getting hit while having at least slightly better DPS than Spyro, even if it's still not particularly impressive, then maybe you should use another Skylander. Maybe you should use another one in the starter pack. Maybe you should use the guy we're going to be talking about in the next video. Yeah, I'll see you then.